Thank y'all so much for taking your first step on the porch. We talk about real life faith. I got to work on that intro a little bit. We got to figure out that intro a little bit because I said something last week and now I'm saying it this week, but it's okay. We're here, we're still learning, and we will get through it. And so, really want to start off with one checking on y'all. How are you doing? I hope your day's going well. We are not on the porch today. It's a little cold outside lately here and not supposed to be. And it is. And so we are just going to roll with the punches, right? We're going to keep going. We are back in my fiance's office. I call her own studio because she be mastering a bunch of things in here and she is just on top of it all the time in here. And this is where all her best work is. So I thought, why not be in the space where my fiance handles her business and maybe get some of her energy. So aside from being cold outside, y'all, I think we got a good topic today. And one topic that means a lot to me because it really dives into my one word check-in. And so my one word check-in, because I really want to start to do that a little bit more. If I don't do it in other episodes, okay. But for this episode, I really want to do it. My one word check-in for today is aware. Y'all, I just feel so aware. Like I feel like I feel so not comfortable in my skin because I do feel comfortable in my skin, but I feel as though I know who I am in my skin. And I understand that as human beings, we evolve every single day and that changes every single day, 100%. And the foundation doesn't change. And so I feel so good and I feel so aware. And that is my one word check-in for today. I feel aware. Now, in the past, I could never have told you that, right? Especially a couple of years ago when I was going through my big journey, when I first started my journey in trying to identify who I was. And so now I can be loud about it. I can be joyous about it. I can finally talk about who I am and be okay with it and be comfortable in my own skin. But it started and it began in silence. And so that work that I did in silence took hours. And so the topic of today is hours in silence. And so in order for us to get into that topic, the first thing that we have to identify is what is silence, right? And so I actually have here a definition about silence that really resonates with me. And we will say the whole thing and then we're going to unpack it. Okay. So the definition for silence is the absence of sound. Silence is the absence of sound. It is a space where thoughts echo and contemplation finds its voice. Now, I want to break this down a little bit because I want to break it down into three parts, right? Because silence is such an interesting term and has such negative connotation towards it because sometimes, y'all, we just can't handle it. And it's so hard to sit in silence. Now, it's a difference between being alone and you sitting in silence. The difference between being quiet and sitting in silence. But I really want to unpack this definition a little bit more. So, the first thing that stood out to me when I wrote this definition down is the absence of sound. And so, when we think about the absence of sound, it's so interesting because I agree to disagree on this a little bit. Because while yes, silence is the absence of sound, it is not the absence of volume. And so when we think about that, we think about it like this. Who is that person? Are you that person who would rather be at home rather than go out, right? For me, I am the couch potato, right? That's my term for it, is being a couch potato. Not someone who's lazy, but just someone who just enjoys to just kind of be by themselves. And I've learned and developed that over an ample amount of years to be able to enjoy that. But it's a difference completely than what we're even talking about, right? Because when we're by ourselves and we're those couch potatoes, we're home. Yes, we're not around a bunch of people, but we're doing things that keep us occupied, right? Like I know for me, when I am a couch potato, especially on the weekends when I have no work at all, I don't have to go in. I'm a couch potato. The one thing that I do is have things that occupy me. I watch TV, right? I may play a video game, right? I may be on my phone scrolling. I may cook. I may clean. Just kind of take care of me, and that's something that I say all the time. I'm just kind of just taking care of me. But I'm not taking care of me. I'm occupying me in a state that does not need a high amount of silence as something that I'm always dealing with every single day while I'm at work. Because here's the thing: when we, as couch potatoes, as the vice president of the couch potatoes, what happens when the Wi-Fi goes out? What happens if the phone dies? What happens if I finish cleaning? What happens if there's nothing else to cook? What happens if the game just doesn't occupy me anymore? What happens if there's nothing to watch on TV? As a couch potato, the first thing that we do once all of that happens, after we've gone through our checklist of things to occupy us, the first thing that we do is we try to reach out to people. We try to say, hey, let's figure out, let me just kind of see what I can do. Maybe I should go out. Maybe, right? Maybe 2 hours has passed and I told people that I wasn't going to go out and be a couch potato. And then as vice president of the Couch Potatoes Club, I just want to go out. And a lot of the times, my friends would say, or your friends would say, well, what happened? And rather than just being honest with them because you don't know the honest truth, you tell them, I just felt like going out now. I just had a change of heart. And while that may be true, we have to unpack that a little bit more, because when you unpack that, it is not saying I just wanted to go out. It's saying I had nothing else to do to occupy myself. And so I would rather do what I don't want to do in going out and being around people rather than sitting in silence and allowing the silence to amplify its true volume. Because once you are in silence, here's the second part of the definition: the space and the thoughts begin to echo. And so the second part is so big, right? Because I think about a space, right? A space where thoughts echo. And for us, we may think that the space is the environment in which we are, but in actuality, it is the space within us, right? Going back to the analogy of the couch potato, we are going to a different environment, not because that environment has a space where echoes, where all of my thoughts echo. Because if I was in a room full of people in that same environment, maybe that space wouldn't have all those echoes. But because of us being in silence and there is no sound and the volume has risen, now the thoughts begin to echo. Y'all ever been in a room where you ever been in a quiet room and it is just completely quiet and you just feel as though you hear everything, right? Like you just have the bionic ears, they pop up and you can hear everything, from the restructuring of the foundation to the crack in the ceiling to people driving by, even down to your own breath and even the flutters of your eyelashes when you blink. Who has felt that? Because I know I have, right? Where I am in a room and I am in silence and the absence of sound has taken place, but the volume has risen. And now I'm in a space, and the space from within, I hear everything. I'm starting to hear these little things, but then that those echoes of my thoughts start to come in. And that space is always going to be there with us because it is within us. And once we get past that thoughts of echo, because we're not ready for that, we're trying to get out and go, especially when we're at that point, the contemplation finds its voice. And so that voice of contemplation can mean a lot of different things, right? To some people, especially to people who are who believe in God, and some who don't believe in God and aren't religious. To some, it is the Holy Spirit talking to them. The others, it is your conscience. And that voice of contemplation, whether it is the Holy Spirit in your mind, whether that is your sense of your sense of your conscience speaking, it's a voice. And that's something we all can agree on, right? It is a voice. And so that voice of contemplation is the voice that no one else can hear except for you. And so when I look at this definition, it's kind of like it's a step-by-step process, right? Of what silence does and how silence comes into your life. Because it first says the absence of sound, right? So sound goes down, but the volume goes up. And then in that space, that volume is that it are first those those thoughts of echo. And then the third thing is once the absence of sound comes into effect, once volume increases, once that space becomes crowded with thoughts and they begin to echo, the last part is that voice of contemplation coming in your head and finally speaking to you. Now, that voice of contemplation can be a lot of different things. It can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. And so for a good thing, let's start with the good first. That good thing can be an ample amount of things. That voice could be words of affirmation. That voice could give you all of the love, the care that you need. It is that voice that tells you, hey, you got to keep going. You got this. Ain't no problem. And for that voice being a positive voice, the good voice of contemplation, that's the Holy Spirit. That's the Holy Spirit speaking through you and stating, hey, I got you, right? That's God speaking through you and saying, hey, I got your back. Even so much so that the voice of contemplation will make you feel pain in order to set you up for success. I'll give you an example. Let's say you are in a situation where you know good from wrong, and someone is offering you or telling you or asking you to do something that is wrong. Knowing that you know it's wrong, you're starting to go towards danger. And so that voice of contemplation in a good way loves you so much and cares about you so much and is so aware so much that it begins to say no, but you keep moving forward to the danger. And so now that voice of contemplation says, I love you so much that because you can't hear me, I have to now speak through action. And now I have to give you this gut feeling. Anybody had that gut feeling before? That gut feeling that, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. I got a bad feeling about this. I don't know. Something seems off. Well, believe it or not, y'all, that is the voice of contemplation in a positive way, trying to save you from danger. And that voice loves you so much that it has to instill a sense of discomfort and a little bit of pain in order for you to understand that you are going in the wrong direction. That may be your situation, but that also may be just your life. And then you have the other side. Then you have the voice of contemplation that is negative. And I am one that has heard this voice growing up my entire life. And this is why this topic is so big to me. But this voice of contemplation that is negative is the one voice of contemplation in my life that has really enabled doors to close in my life rather than open. And not close because of love, but close because of telling me that I'm not worth it, of telling me that I'm not capable, of telling me that I'm too short, telling me that I'm too fat, telling me that I'm ugly, telling me that I can't do that, telling me that I'm not capable, telling me that I am not that guy, telling me that I don't have what it takes, telling me quit, telling me leave now. Not because the opportunity is bad for you, but also because the opportunity is greater than your ability. And that's not the voice we want to hear. We want to hear the good voice. But for a lot of us, the only voice that we hear is the bad. There's a quote that I always talk about, and it is, in a room full of people, the mirror speaks the loudest. What does that mean? What that means is that no matter who is around you, no matter who tells you good, no matter who tells you that you're enough, no matter who tells you that you are capable of doing so many great things, the mirror speaks the loudest. And the mirror is not just an item in this quote, but it is the voice of contemplation. Because no matter what anyone else tells you, whether good, bad, or ugly, it doesn't matter, because the person, that voice of contemplation, will lead you to either make a decision that is good or make a decision that is regretful. And so an example of this could be going to an event, right? Have you ever been to an event and it's a room full of people, it's a packed house, maybe it's a function, it's a packed house, and you are something in your mind, even though everybody's talking, it's so loud you can't even hear yourself think. And then this voice comes in that says, go home, or you need to leave. Or better yet, because I know you can't hear me right now, I'm going to speak through action into your stomach to say, hey, ooh, I got a bad feeling about this. Or in action to your brain, because, hey, listen, I'm starting to get a headache. I got to go home. The music's too loud. I'm starting to get a migraine. I'm starting to get a really bad headache. I don't have any ibuprofen with me. Like, I need to go. While we may think that that is a coincidence, believe it or not, it is actually the mirror speaking to you, speaking so loudly that while no one else can hear it, because it speaks no sound to everyone else, it speaks volume to you. See, volume and sound are not reciprocal, because volume is more than sound, and sound is not more than volume, because volume equates to more than just one thing. Volume equates to sound and impact. You ever hear someone talking and they speak and they may have a really good message, or maybe they don't have a good message, and you hear them, but you're not listening to them? They are producing sound. But then there's that other person who's speaking, and everything that person says, you are listening. It is not going in one ear and out the other. It is in you now. It is flooding your conscience. It is flooding your thoughts. It is flooding your heart in such a positive way, but it's also maybe thought-provoking. That while both individuals are producing sound, one is producing volume. Because volume, that one that you're listening to that is really just hitting all cylinders from a language perspective, is producing sound, but they are also producing impact on your life. That is exactly what the voice of contemplation does in you. And so for those who have that good voice of contemplation, doesn't it feel good? It feels so good. It feels so good to be able to look yourself in the mirror look that person in the mirror, because they do have a figure, they do have a face. That voice does have a face, right? That there is a name to that face. And it feels so good to look in that mirror and talk to that voice. And it just be so positive. It's so positive. Knowing that even though I am alone, I am never alone. Knowing that even though I may be backed into a corner, I have someone in my corner. But for those who don't have that good voice of contemplation, I won't want to pray for you, but also I want to help you. And so, how do you get that bad voice to become a good voice? Or how do you better understand that bad voice or that voice of contemplation that's speaking negative thoughts in your life? Well, it's time to look in the mirror. Very similar to life, right? When we are having an issue with someone, we are having a big issue, right? An issue that can't be solved over text, that can't be solved in a phone call, because it may be interpreted or misinterpreted the wrong way. And I need to make sure that they understand what I'm feeling, and the conversation needs to be direct. You meet them face to face. And so what makes them different from that voice that speaks louder than them? And so the biggest thing about looking yourself in the mirror and having that conversation with that person in the mirror is intentionally having that conversation with yourself in the mirror and recognizing that person in the mirror. And so I know a lot of people will say, well, Jarred, I know who that person is. It's me. And I look at him every single day. My uncle used to say, my uncle asked me when I was a kid, he said, when was the last time you looked yourself in the mirror? And I thought to myself, well, I looked myself in the mirror this morning. He said, when? And I said, well, when I was in the bathroom, washing my hands after using the restroom, I looked myself in the mirror. He said, were you looking yourself in the mirror, or were you looking at your hands being washed in the mirror? Or were you looking at something else or a feature on your face in the mirror? And I said, okay, you got me. And then I thought I was smart, and I was like, oh, hold on. I was also walking past a mirror, and I got dressed this morning, and I actually stopped and looked myself in the mirror. My uncle then said, well, did you look yourself in the mirror, or did you look at your clothes to make sure that they look good in the mirror? I said, okay, you got me there. And then my uncle stopped me before I thought I was a smart aleck, and then said, the interesting thing about a human being is, while we want to understand who we are, we never give ourselves time to understand who we are. Because in order for you to look yourself in the mirror, in order for you to actually look yourself in the mirror, you have to intentionally look yourself in the mirror. And just like being a couch potato, right? You can't occupy yourself while you're intentionally looking yourself in the mirror, because now you're distracting yourself from the actual conversation, right? Imagine being in a one-on-one, a meeting, one-on-one with someone, where you need to have a real serious conversation. And while you're sitting there eye to eye, ready to have this conversation, ready to go, they're on their phone, scrolling through TikTok. I hear you. Because while you may be invested, they clearly are not. And because they are not invested, now your reciprocation, whether that be non-verbally and verbally, is, well, if they're interested, then this conversation is a waste of time. How do you think that person in the mirror feels when you do that? Because when you look yourself in the mirror, there's a person there. That mirror reflects and reciprocates what you give it. If you're on their phone, the person in the mirror will be on their phone. It's a waste of time. Cool. Might as well do it myself. You're looking around, you're thinking about what to eat. You're thinking about, oh, I really don't want to do this in your mind, but you're not saying it. And you're saying, oh, I guess we should have this conversation, I guess. It's crazy how the mirror will reflect the same thing that you produce. So you have to, in order to do that, you have to intentionally have that conversation with yourself in the mirror. And a lot of times that is a silent conversation. But as I said before, while it may be silent, it does not mean that the volume is not through the roof. And so in order to do that, a couple things have to happen. And just to give you a couple disclaimers about that, because I have experienced that in my own life as it pertains to taking that time with myself in the mirror for not just hours, but days, is understanding one, it's not easy. And when you first do it, it's super uncomfortable. It's super unrelatable. It's why am I doing this? Right? Because you don't know how to start the conversation. I think about SpongeBob when I went on my own journey. I thought about SpongeBob. It was an episode where he was trying to write the paper, and he was like in some of these and writing dots, and he was like, and it looked like he was writing a novel, a masterpiece on this paper, and it was smoking, and the pen was smoking, and then as soon as he picked up the paper to show the camera, it said the. That's how it feels when you first start that conversation with yourself in the mirror, and take that time in silence. It's not easy. It's going to feel daunting. It's going to feel difficult. It takes work. It takes time. That's why it's not minutes in silence. It's hours in silence. Because believe it or not, hours is just the minimum. It could take days. It could take weeks. It could take months. You may need multiple sessions, but it's worth it. It also takes patience, right? We'll talk about time in a couple episodes, but it takes patience. Give yourself patience. Give yourself grace during that time. Because it's a conversation that, while it always needed to happen, a lot of us don't want it to happen. Because when you look yourself in the mirror, when you have that conversation with the voice of contemplation, and that voice of contemplation now has a face and eyes and thoughts, you realize that is the one person in the world that you cannot outsmart. That is the one person in the world that you cannot outdo. It is a simple one-on-one. Mm-hmm. There is no tactics. There is no, oh, here's how I'm going to do this to get over and get my way. There's none of that. Because you can't use it, because that person in the mirror knows all your tricks. And that person in the mirror will reciprocate everything. And so it will bounce back. And then you just have to do the one thing that you've never wanted to do. And that's not just unpack yourself, but that is be honest with yourself. And this work is so important. It's so important. Because in order for you to understand others, you have to be willing to understand you. And if you don't understand you, then how can you understand others? It's like love. A lot of people, and I've heard this multiple times growing up, is you can't love others if you don't love yourself. And that cannot be more true. But in order for you to even love, you have to understand. Because love does not just come and say, oh, I love someone. Because in order for you to say, I love someone, the first question that it's asked is why. And that term why isn't curiosity, it's understanding. And so in order for you to understand someone, even understand what others are going through, understand where other people are at, you have to understand where you are at, where you were, and also where you're headed. During this time, in this time of being in silence, it's a lot of self-reflection. It's a lot of talking to this person in the mirror and not just going over the good, because you will go over the good. The good is so easy to go over, right? But it's also going over the bad and ugly. It's understanding who I was, who I am, and where I'm going. It's also understanding the lessons learned. It's understanding who was I, who am I, why did I do that? Why didn't I do that? I don't understand. Can you help me understand why I made that decision over this decision? Why I went into that room knowing that I shouldn't have went into that room, but I did. And why did I respond once I got caught? And I don't understand why I did that. Why did I say that? Why did that come out of my mouth? I don't get it. And that can be so because it is the things that we try to keep in the back of our mind for so long. But believe it or not, that memory storage in the back of your brain is that person in the mirror's primary storage, because they remember it all. They were right there with you. And even when they try to explain it, not the good, but the bad and ugly, you don't want to hear it. And so this conversation is for you to finally understand you. This conversation is also important because it gives you some sense of awareness in yourself, but it also gives God the time to work on you. I wrote this quote down. It's something that I just thought about when going over this is looking in the mirror is like reading a chapter of your own story. It reflects not just your appearance, but also the journey, challenges, and growth written on the pages of your book so far. So I talked about in the last episode, right, about reading the script and trying to understand what's next in my life, because our story is already written. We are just the first person and maybe the main character in the book, and it may have our name on the book, but we are not the writer and the author of the book. Because while we may have a pen in our hand writing down what's next, it's not a pen, it's a highlighter. Because you are actually being able to mark down, I forgot about this. Oh, I forgot about this. Oh, forgot about this. That's what happens when you're in that moment. You're highlighting the books, the chapters in the book, both good, bad, and ugly, that maybe you wanted to see, but also the ones that you did not want to see. And the person ahead of you, which is God, is already finished. He's just waiting for you to catch up and understand why that decision was made based upon other decisions. You know, my story is so interesting. I took this journey. I did exactly what I'm telling you, what I am recommending to you about a couple years ago. I think it was almost 4 years ago. I took this journey, and it was the hardest conversation I've ever had in my life. So back then I would go to therapy, and one thing that my therapist told me to do was to try silence for good and look at silence in a different way. And so one day, it was right in between COVID times, I decided to do it. I said, hey, I really want to try this. My therapist said she's been really working with me. I've been feeling so much better. So she's not wrong, right? She hasn't been wrong so far. So let me try it out. And so I got my Bible, which is actually this Bible right here, actually. And I got some pen and paper, and I sat there in my room for a couple hours. Now, context, I tried to do this before when she requested it a couple sessions ago, like 2 or 4 sessions before I actually did this. And it was so unsuccessful because, just like I said before, I was on my phone. I was playing a video game. I thought that was working, but I turned the volume down on the TV. So silence, right? I I did everything. I was cooking and I thought that was silence. And she kept telling me, no, I need you to actually be in silence and talk to that person in the mirror to try to understand that voice. And so this time I did it. And I was in there for about 2.5 hours. And during that time, there was actually a storm that was around the area. And I was like, yeah, like I am going to do this. I'm going to be in silence. And believe it or not, it was a really good session, right? I was in there for 2.5 hours. I started praying because I am a child of God and asking God, allow me to have this conversation and understand me. and not understand me on the surface level, but unpack me so that I can understand who I am and why you made me who I am and what led to me even being here in this room today and why. And I want it all, God. I want the good, bad, the ugly. I need you to come and explain it to me, and just so that I can understand that person in the mirror, because that person in the mirror has been giving me so many negative thoughts. And after a couple hours, I thought I made some work done. And then the storm turned into a hurricane. And that hurricane knocked out all the power, knocked out everything. And so when I was finished with my own session and I tried to turn the light on, it came on. And then all the power went. I was out of power for 4 days. And in that 4 days, the first thing in real time, the first thing that I did was call my parents, call my girlfriend, who is now my fiance, and talk to them as much as I can. And it felt like God, in not turning those lights back on, was saying, I'm not finished with you yet. Because now we're getting to the good part. We got through all the good stuff in 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now it's gonna take some time to get through some of the good, some of the bad, and the ugly. But I need you locked in. And this isn't just a multiple session. We're gonna do this all in one sitting. Because this is what you asked for. And so I tried to distract myself with my parents, with my girlfriend, with my family. I was scared. And eventually, my laptop died. Eventually, my phone died. But you know what didn't die? The contemplation of voice. The voice of contemplation. When I looked myself in the mirror, he was still there. And when I prayed, it was like God saying, hey, you tried to distract yourself again. But now, as I told you before, we're not done yet. Now let's really get into it. And so for 4 days, I didn't have a lot of food because I didn't want to open up the fridge and then it get thawed out and I messed up. So I ate a little bit, maybe cereal here and there. That's when I got my addiction for cereal, y'all. And I'm very addicted to cereal. So it is what it is. But I grew my addiction to not just cereal, but I grew my addiction to that person in the mirror because I wanted to understand him more. And y'all, it was a lot of hours of crying. It was a lot of hours of yelling. I can't even imagine what my neighbors were thinking. They were probably like, who is he talking to? The lights are out. Like, there's nobody to talk to. Like, I know he lives alone. So who is he talking to? I'm screaming. I'm yelling. I'm in the mirror, y'all, talking to myself as if someone is in that room. But as I said before, remember, even though we may be alone, we are never alone. And so I was having a conversation with that person, the person that I needed to have the conversation with for so long in my life. And it took so long. It took 4 days. Why? Because at the end of the day, I was trying to neglect the person who knew me better than I knew myself. And oh, did he have something to say? And so in that moment, in those 4 days, something died in me, but the understanding of who I am finally was established. I finally was able to understand who I am, why I am the way I am, where did I come from, the decisions that I made, both good, bad, and ugly. I finally was able to understand those things. And granted, while we didn't get to the end of the book, because that book is always writing, especially while I'm 10 toes down on this earth, so close. I got so close to a point that I got so close to to the chapter I was currently in, that it felt like I finally understand. And for the first time, I finally heard that voice of contemplation tell me, good job. And y'all, that meant so much to me to hear that. It meant so much to me to hear good job come from that person in the mirror. It felt so good to hear I got you. And hear that. And that speak volumes through that room. 4 days later, the lights come back on, and believe it or not, before I even call my girlfriend, before I even call my family, I stayed in it for a little bit longer because I became invested. And as human beings, we care, we have love, we show compassion for everyone around us, but it's so hard to do that to the same degree for ourselves. And so if you're struggling, if you're feeling like that voice of contemplation is so negative, if you're feeling like that person is never telling me good things, but also telling me all the bad things about me, it's time for you to look yourself in the mirror and spend some hours in silence, because it is so important to understand who you are and why you are who you are. And I'm not telling you that you'll find the answer, you'll find the whole answer, but just like an investment, you'll make a whole lot of ground. But you need to stay committed. Because in Proverbs, we'll go quickly to the scripture, Proverbs chapter 27, verse 19. Oh, just past pause. In chapter 27, verse 19, it says, as in water, face reflects face. So a man's heart reveals the man. In order for you to understand you, you have to be willing to face yourself. In order to understand where your heart is, where you're at currently, and then understand where you want to go or where you're heading, you have to understand who you are and where you came from. And it cannot come from anybody else's sound. It can only come from the volume within you. And that volume within you is that voice of contemplation. And so be courageous, be willing, be invested, be committed. Because I promise you, as I said, while it may not be easy, while it may take time, while it may take a lot of work, it's worth it. Because you have to be willing to answer the question. That is a question that is so hard to answer. And so if that's you, and you need to have that conversation, and you're a person who likes to begin with the end in mind, that question is simple. And make sure you write this down and answer it. And if you can't, it's time for you to spend some hours in silence. If you can, continue to spend those hours in silence to understand more. But I want you to answer this question. Who are you? Who are you? So if you enjoyed this episode, I just want to say thank you for sticking around. I know this was a very long episode. It's probably going to be one of the longer episodes because this topic means so much to me and has so much substance in my life. And I believe can have so much substance in your life because this is the first part of working on yourself and working on you. But if you really enjoyed this, just come back next week. And if this message is not for you, well, hopefully the message next week is. Maybe the week after that. Maybe the week after that. Continue to invest in yourself. But I want you to really seriously answer that question, who are you? All right, y'all. So that is all that I have for you all today. I want to give you all your time back and respect your time. But yet again, y'all, thank y'all for coming to the porch. Thank y'all for taking your first step onto the porch. Remember just to keep it real, live life, and keep the faith. This is Jarred Pernier signing off and stepping off of the porch. Love y'all. See y'all next week.